Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to today's webinar, Taking a Bite Out of Safety in Data Centers. My name is Beth Driano. I'm a chartered member of IOSH and a committee member for the Hazardous Industries Group. We're really excited to bring this discussion to you today. I'm sure you all know data centers are the backbone of our digital world. With this role comes the responsibility of ensuring safety, not just for personnel, but also for our equipment and the environment. Today, we're bringing to you industry experts from CBRE who will walk us through some key aspects of data center safety. Before we dive in, I want to extend our sincere thanks to IOSH for making this event possible. Their commitment to advancing safety is helping to drive really meaningful progress across many industries and nations. I also want to thank today's attendees for taking time out of your day to be here. Your engagement is what makes these conversations so valuable. Now, I'd like to welcome our speakers who will share their insights and experiences. Rather than making formal introductions, I want to let each speaker share a bit about themselves as we begin. So with that, Kevin, over to you. Can you kick us off?
Yeah, thank you very much, Beth. Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Cote. I have about 25 years of experience in health and safety. The past 3 years have been data center. Before that, it was manufacturing, transportation, and environmental type work is kind of my background on that. And so I'm very excited to talk about data centers today. And I'm going to hand this off to Bridgette. Bridgette will also introduce herself, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. I am Bridgette Douglas. I have about 25 years of experience also in QHSE, known for driving excellence in the health and safety field across multiple sectors from oil and gas, facilities maintenance, manufacturing, and most recently with data centers. I have about 8 years with CBRE and have successfully implemented robust management systems and fostered strong safety cultures across many sectors. I appreciate the opportunity for us to speak to you. This webinar is going to provide a foundational overview of critical safety and operational topics in our data center environments. We'll begin with the basics of data center infrastructure, including facility types and site selection. Then we will explore essential safety protocols across electrical systems, cooling operations, and fire prevention. It'll equip each of you with the basic knowledge of the high-stakes environments and safety and how we effectively manage them. And now I'll turn it back over to Kevin.
Well, thank you. So Bridgette already talked about basically what we're going to be talking today in our agenda. And we'll get right at data centers 101, the basics. What is a data center? So overall, this is just kind of a look of how a data center usually is set up. So you have your power generation from your utility, and then it goes into transformers, and then is into our power bus, and then broken down into energy there. Typically in the United States, it's anywhere from 13,000 to 16,000 volts, and then gets stepped down into the facility at 480 volts. Depending on where you're at, depends on in the world, depends on what your power would be brought into the site. From there, we're powering all this equipment. It also has a bunch of heat that it gives off. So we have to chill that. So then we have a whole like HVAC chiller, cooling tower system that is attached to that. And then in order to support that, you have water storage, and you also have a lot of fuel storage. So what are the different types of data centers? So really, if you look at the enterprise and the hyperscale are kind of the same. So enterprise is a company that owns their own data center, runs their own data center. Hyperscale is a large data center or large enterprise center. And then if you look at carrier, hotel, and co-location, they're kind of the same thing as well. So there would be a building owner. The building owner sets everything up, has the electrical, everything ready for you to plug in your servers. And then the company comes in and manages their servers and data inside your building. There's a retail side, which would be a small kind of co-location or a small part. So you may only have a rack. Where wholesale, you'd have maybe a floor, maybe a room with multiple racks, with multiple different types of equipment. How do we rate a data center? So it's like it's tiered. So you have tier 1 through tier 4. Much like if you're familiar with safety and advanced safety, how you have like a performance level of your equipment or your safety systems, where you have a PLA through PLE. And really, most of it is about redundancy and how it would take on a failure. So how would it fail? Is it going to totally take the system down, or will you be able to absorb those failures without that? So, for instance, here we have tier 1, and so you just have the basic. So you have a full load data center. In order for that data center to operate and function, it needs 4 generators, and it only has 4 generators. If one goes down and you need that generator, you're not going to have enough power for that. So that's your N, or that's your tier 1. I'm sorry, that's your tier 1 type of system, and that's at 99.671% uptime. And then tier 2 is adding redundancy, and we'll get into redundancy here in just a moment. So I'm just going to kind of skip through these kind of quickly. And then you have your tier 3 and your tier 4. So what's the difference in that? So for that, if you have a tier 1, and you have something that happens, you're going to go down. If you have your tier 2 and you have some redundancy there, the expected downtime would be 22 hours per year for a 99.741% uptime. For tier 3, the downtime would be 1.6 hours annually would be the expected. It's not really expected, but would be the allowable time for tier 3 type of situation. And tier 4 is 26 minutes annually. So that's the difference between 99.671 versus 99.99% of uptime. Whoops. All right. Now we're just talking about redundancy. And we're starting out at N. And what we're talking about types of data center redundancy, we're talking about power, cooling, network, backup redundancy, server and hardware redundancy. So if we have our basic N redundancy, remember that's 4, let's say just for able to speak about it, you have 4 generators there, you're at N redundancy. So now we go to N plus 1 redundancy. We have those 4 generators, plus we have 1 extra one in case one goes down. And then you have your 2N redundancy, would be you have 4 generators to make sure everything runs, and then you have a backup 4 generators. So in total, you're going to have 8 generators. So if one goes down, the other one can back it up. And so that's the 2N redundancy. And then 2N plus 1 redundancy is basically just how it sounds. It'd be, you'd have like your 8 generator rates for your 2N plus 1 there. And it goes throughout the entire system. So same thing, if you had 2 cooling towers as your N, and you want a 2N, you have to have 4 cooling towers. And so it goes throughout the system with that, depending on what your needs are. So let's say you don't have anything that's customer facing, or you don't have anything that would affect anything in the outside world. A lot of times that would be like research, those types of things. That's where you'll see the N redundancy. 2N plus 1 redundancy, you'll see a lot in either government or defense or other type of systems that they just cannot go down. And here is how a typical data center is laid out. Usually you'll have like your offices and your business is ran in the front. And then we have what's called a white space. Your white space is where your servers are with that. And your servers are usually in rows And usually the rows are divided in a hot aisle and a cold aisle. So you have a cold aisle and it's blowing across the servers, and then your hot aisle is absorbing all of that heat and then bringing it back into your HVAC system. And typically these are on raised floors, so you can do that. And so your ducting and things like that are all going through the floor, along with your power, along with could be data as well. Typically data is run up top, and you can also run power up top as well. It depends on how your layout is of your data center. Okay. Any questions, or I'll pause for a second here.
Hi, Kevin. We have a ton of questions for you, actually. First question, since we talked about it just now, are the raised floors where the power and data cables running, are they considered confined space, and how do you access them for maintenance activities?
Hey, great question. So it really depends on how they're set up. Some are really deep, 36 to 40 inches, and you'd have to go by your company's definition of a confined space. Typically, how you can, I wouldn't say work around, but typically what we do is we only open up 4 spaces or 6 spaces, meaning like floor tiles. And so what there is there's like a suction cup and like a handle, and you like suction cup and pull that tile out. So we only allow a certain amount of tiles open for that, because we don't want anybody to fall in that isn't part of that work, which we've seen. Or you may have to have different, obviously you want to do like a job hazard analysis. So if you're right in front of a door, you're probably going to want to close off that door so nobody can just walk right into that area. But I've seen them as low as 18 inches and as deep as 3 feet. So it really depends on your space and how you handle confined spaces.
Okay, thank you. One more that I think is important to what you just covered, and it involves safety redundancies. What are the most common, or what are the standard redundancies for hyperscale facilities, whether that's power, cooling, fire suppression, or any of the things that you talked about before?
It really depends on what the needs are for the customer and what their redundancy is. But however, I think what the question would be you'd see redundancy in all your areas. So it'd be redundancy in your electrical, redundancy in your cooling, redundancy in your data side there as well. There's also emergency planning that goes on. So what happens if that data goes? So it may be stored in a different location as well. There's different areas, and depending on what that company is doing and where they are servicing, they may have that same data in 3 or 4 different data centers throughout the world. So it can be accessed easier. So like, for instance, like a company like Netflix may have your movie that you want to see in a whole bunch of different locations or different places, because you want to access it quickly. So if you're in the west side of the state, and your data center is probably going to be on the west side, so it'll be faster. But if you're on the east side, you're probably going to be accessing a data center on the east side for that same movie. Did that make sense?
I think so. Yeah, thank you. I'll let you go ahead. We still have some more questions, but I'll make sure to space them out so we can cover all the material.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. So to me, in data centers, you really cannot talk about data centers without talking about electrical safety. And I kind of broke it down into a couple different sectors here. So you have your general electrical safety, generator safety, and then you have your UPS safety. UPS is your uninterruptible power supply, which is your battery backup. That's pretty important, because if we were to have a problem in the data center and we lost power, there's a certain amount of time that it takes for the generators to power up spool up and start creating energy. It's a multiple fractions of seconds, but you don't want your data to be lost. So that's why there's a battery backup. Generally, I believe the battery backup is good for 15 minutes. Generally, it's a fraction of a second. So if you've ever been in a place where all of a sudden you saw the power drop and then for a second the lights blinked out and came back on, we don't want that in the data center. So you want to have power all the time. So you're going to see UPSs and batteries on site. Along with high power, is high power density. There's a lot of power in this little small area here with that. As I was stating before, a small data center is 1 to 5 megawatts. A large hyperscale facility is 10 to 100 megawatts of power. Things that we do for that is we have defined processes. There's always a defined process. No matter what you do, always has a process in the data center, especially when we're talking about electrical safety. So we have our method of procedure. And generally in our method of procedure is always 2 people, and we call that a pilot co-pilot. So the pilot is the one with the method of procedure, and they're reading off to the co-pilot. They're saying, hey, flip switch A. The co-pilot will say, flipping switch A, and they'll flip that switch, and then they'll go through their procedure with that. With that is a JHA. So we're also looking at our job hazard analysis, saying, hey, what's going to happen here? How much power? What's our arc flash label saying? Our arc flash label will say, hey, how many cals do we have here? What PPE is required? Things that we're starting to see too is that we're using remote switches. So we're getting that person out. We have remote rooms where we're doing remote switching as well. And that's basically turning off the power remotely, so that person is out of the room or out of the area. So if something were to go wrong when they flip that switch, it would not be catastrophic to human health. What we follow in the United States is NFPA 70E. Depending on where you're at in the world, your process may be a little bit different, or you may have different standards that you follow with that. Our 70E, basically, OSHA says you have to have an electrical safety program. We say, okay, well, what does that look like? We look to NFPA 70E, and that identifies our PPE identification, our arc flash studies. Hey, you have to have an arc flash study. We need to know what will happen. What is the energy that will come out if there was a arc flash? It also defines things like panels have to be UL listed, how those are worked. It defines your lockout tagout process. It also defines electrical safe work conditions. It also defines that you have to have a coordination study. So if you flip this switch, what's going to happen downstream or upstream with that switch? And then we also have, which is a little bit newer now, we've always had 70B, but now it's incorporated into our rulings. And so now you have NFPA 70B. And 70B is the electrical maintenance program. And that defines what a maintained electrical system is, what it looks like, what it has, what are the main components, what's the maintenance schedule, and defines on what that condition is. It'll define how often you need to do thermography, how often you need to do oil changes, if there's oil changes needed, how often you have to certify your breakers. Those types of things are all things that it would identify. Generator. So you have generators. These are very, very large generators, typically on site. So some of the electrical safety things that I kind of pointed out would be load transfers. So what happens when the power goes out and that load is transferred? Load testing. So as we are doing maintenance, we also do load testing. Generally, I believe it's about 35% of the load test monthly. And then once a year, they do, I think, 90 to 100% load capacity on the generators to make sure that they can hold that load and that there isn't any defects in that. With that also comes a lot of fuel. So anywhere from 30,000 to 60,000 gallons of fuel Generally, depending on the location of the data center, depends on how much time they'd have on generator before they have to be refueled. So if you're in an area that has hurricanes or those types of things, and in the past it's taken X amount of time, I'm just using 48 hours or 72 hours. You'll be able to run full generator. That would be the expected load capacity, and that'd be the expected fuel amount that you'd have on site. What's interesting is there's also a lot of contracts with the fuel suppliers. So local fuel suppliers and out-of-state fuel suppliers to make sure that there's enough fuel if there is a disaster or if there is a storm or something happens, that they have a fuel supply, reliable fuel supply, in order to keep their data center up and going that entire time. With that are some environmental requirements too. So most of the time, fuel is stored either in an above ground storage tank or an underground storage tank. An above ground storage tank is exactly that. It's above ground and just has some really general rules as far as what you have to do as far as inspections and those types of things. An underground storage tank has a lot more rules, and it really depends on what state you live in. It could even city or county that you live in for that. Depends on what you need for to operate an underground storage tank and what their program is. Generally in the US, they identify like an A, a B, and a C operator. An A operator is generally the owner. A B operator is the either on-site person or a contractor that comes in and manages that program. So they're identifying what kind of system you have, how you test, how you have your leak detection, your annual type of stuff. And then you have your C operator. Your C operator is generally the day-to-day person. They're going to take readings on the tank. They're going to go around, walk around, make sure there's nothing in the sumps, make sure there's no obvious signs of leak for those systems. Along with all that fuel, there's also other environmental type stuff that goes along with that. So for in the US, we have what's called Tier 2 EPA requirement, and that's really community rights and know. And what it says is if you have an EHS, which we'll be talking about this too with batteries, which is an extremely hazardous substance. So an extremely hazardous substance would be something like sulfuric acid. And if you have over X amount of pounds or gallons of sulfuric acid, you have to report that in a Tier 2. Same thing with fuel. If you have over 10,000 pounds of something that has an SDS, then you'd have to report that also in your Tier 2. So there's some reporting requirements when you get into those types of things as well. I'm sorry. Also, there may be different requirements depending on the age of your equipment. And again, also depending on where you're at. California for the United States has the most restrictive when you run a generator on how many hours you're allowed to run that generator. Typically, you're allowed to run 100 hours for maintenance, and then over that 100 hours has to be reported there. So you have to have a structure that tracks all of your runtime throughout the season. Also, sometimes what will happen is if there is a high load on the overall system, your supplier's system, so like a 100-degree day, you may also be asked, or you may also join a program that you have reduced energy costs if you can come off the grid at certain high level times. And so that may also activate your generators as well. And that'll be a planned event where, hey, you know, we're going to have 100-degree, we're going to have high demand on the system. Can you please go from our system to your system? And so you'll see that as well. Batteries and UPS. So you have a couple different types of batteries out there. So the most common is lead acid. So you have what's called a valve regulated VRLA, probably one of them becoming more and more than just a flooded lead acid. And that's actually a gel type of sulfuric acid. They're self-maintained, so you don't have to add water. Then you have your flooded lead acid batteries, that's where you get into certain safety aspects as far as IOSH stations, cleanup areas. You're going to have to water test the batteries. Either a contractor or the person on site would need to do that. And then the next one that's coming up is lithium ion. Now, lithium ion, it does provide a denser battery, more reliable battery source, and has longer life. However, data center managers, people that manage data centers are very, I wouldn't say edgy, but they are very cautious as far as bringing new things online. So it's kind of dragging a little bit. Part of that is the fire hazard that comes along with lithium ion. I think that you'll see more and more lithium ion as the regulations catch up. I also think you'll have more requirements for fire protection with if you bring on lithium ion type batteries. Our less common ones are nickel, cadmium, nickel metal, and nickel zinc. Nickel zinc is starting to kind of see more of a resurgence also. It's a good option if you don't have control over heat. So it's a lot, it'll function in a lot warmer conditions. And so they're starting to see that. Nickel cadmium is kind of, there's a lot of environmental risk with the cadmium and health and safety risk with the cadmium. So nickel cadmium hasn't been that particular. Usually they'll see that in small areas or small data center where heat isn't controlled, or I'm sorry, climate isn't controlled, and it can operate in a more warm type conditions. All right. Any other questions?
Yes. I'm going to try to keep these relevant to the topic. We talked about transferring a pretty large quantity of fuel. So when you're talking about that, and I think it was in the generator section, you covered it. How do you ground for that, and how do you, or grounding or earthing, like what are your requirements to prevent static sparks or fire when transferring those large quantities?
Yeah, so basically we have what's called the SPCC plan on site because of that. And so that's a spill prevention countermeasure plan. And in that plan, we'll describe where you fuel. Usually we have a fueling pad that's self-contained that a truck will pull into that will hook up into your fuel system. And at that area is where you would ground and bond. And so you're grounding and bonding between your grounding rod and your truck there during the fuel dispensing. And then overall, I mean, you bring up a good point. Overall, the data center is grounded. Like there's a lot of, we follow NFPA, off the top of my head, I think it's 780 or 785 for grounding systems, and also lightning. So it's lightning and grounding. And so that system is inspected on an annual basis, or if there's things that have changed inside the building, or let's say you did some roof work and you removed lightning rods and the lightning rods were put back up, you would recertify your system. So to make sure, obviously, if the building's struck by lightning, we want to make sure that it has a place to go besides going into your data center.
Thank you. Since you're talking about lightning, do you include surge protection devices on the equipment in a data center, or how does that work?
So yeah, within the system that's built in. So there's circuit breakers, there's ground fault circuit interrupters. That's built into the overall system electrical supply system. So that's why you have breakers. There's a bunch of different things there to protect against surge. Also, it's monitored. So that's part of the UPS. So the UPS will also not only kick on when there's no power, but if there's a surge or if there's a decline, that is watched very closely, and that UPS will bring it in, and that kind of makes that energy level. And so that's also the other function of your UPS or your battery backup there is to stop that fluctuation in current coming in from the utility.
Okay, thank you. How often do you do arc flash studies, and how often are they updated?
So, great question. They're updated in the US every 5 years, or if there's been a change. So, if you've added new equipment, or if you've worked on it, and let's say you took out a switch and replaced it with a new switch, you would have to redo that study to make sure that it's still a good arc flash qualification or value.
Okay. We do have some more, but I'll get them organized and I'll let you go into cooling while I categorize
Awesome.
everything.
Awesome. I love that we're getting all these questions. Thank you very much. Woo! All right. So like I said, you have a lot of power and you have a lot of heat coming off of these servers. And so what do we have to do? We have to cool that. We have to cool that area there too with that. And in general, people that are working in data centers like it because it's a controlled area. It's controlled, it's usually cool. So if you have electricians, they love this job because they're like, man, I'm always working in cool areas for the most part. And it's a clean area and they're clean rooms. And so they're like, this is clean, this is great. And so what we have here are a few different things. So we have cooling towers, and that's bringing in water and cooling that water and then bringing it back into your HVAC system there. Some things that I've noted with cooling towers are obviously fall hazards. So these are tall units. They could be on your roof. And if they're on your roof, you'd have to have a roof safety program and make sure that you can access this area safely. You may have to install guardrails. I prefer passive fall protection. So obviously that's guardrails, as you can see in the picture here. There's guardrails around the top of that. So you would not have to have fall protection unless you're going higher. Those types of things would all have to be evaluated there too. But that brings up a good point too, is know what your tasks are, know what your maintenance tasks are, know where they're going, and then evaluate that and see how what your hazards are. That's your job hazard analysis there and analyze if they need fall protection or not. In the United States, for general industry, it's 4 feet. So anything over 4 feet, you'd have to have fall protection, either passive or active. Passive would be guardrails, railings, those types of things. Active would be actual fall protection. So that would be a harness and lanyard and SRL or however you want to control that fall. Roof safety in the US, if you're closer than 6 feet to an unprotected edge, you need to have fall protection. That could be in the form of active or passive fall protection. The other things when we're working on the cooling towers is lockout, tagout, and also confined spaces. So if you enter these spaces, there could be hazards. So you have to identify those hazards. And in the United States, we only have a 2-tier system for confined spaces. So that is it a confined space? It needs to meet certain criteria. And if it meets that criteria, then does it have a hazard? If it has a hazard, you have to have a confined space entry permit. I know in other parts of the world, it works a little bit different. Know your area. There could be a 4-phase or 4 standard for confined spaces. So just know that, hey, you're going to have to evaluate these areas, evaluate your task, evaluate your hazards. The other concern that we have here too is Legionella and water management. So you need to have a water management program, either contractor or on site, where you're doing testing. Again, this really depends on where you're located at. For the United States, where you're located. Each state, each city, each county may have their own Legionella program or things that you have to do. Some states require you to do nothing. Other states require you to have an annual test. and other cities, counties may be more stringent and maybe monthly. I know New York is very strict on Legionella, and New Jersey is following New York's role on that. So if you're in New Jersey, look for within the next couple months the Legionella rule to change. All right, now going into the HVAC system. So now we have the cooling towers, they're cooling and chilling all this water. How is it used? So you have two different common types of HVAC systems, and this is actually in the data center. We call this the white floor space, actually in where the servers are. So just a technical kind of term. Generally, this is a white floor. I don't know why I went to white floor, but it is generally in a data center. And so at the end of your aisles, as we were discussing earlier, you're going to have either a craw or a crack unit. So a craw is a computer room air handler, and it uses chilled water. And so that's where you're going to have your big chillers. You're going to have a lot of water, a lot of piping, a lot of coolant on site as well. Then you have your crack units, which are computer room air conditioning, and they use refrigerant. So now you're going to have a lot of refrigerant on site. So that also has some challenges too. There are some government regulations in the United States as far as handling ozone depleting substances and having a refrigerant program with that as well. Typically, these units are all on the outside of your white space, and they're cooling the aisles. Again, you have your cold side or cool side, and you have your hot side for that. And it's just a big circle or big cycle between cooling and heating of that. Okay, any questions there?
Yeah, we do have a question about cooling. Do you ever use cryogens like liquid nitrogen for cooling in a data center?
Not that I'm aware of. Generally, there's different refrigerants out there. You have your 134, 134A, those types of things, but I've never heard of liquid nitrogen being used.
Okay, thank you.
Not that it doesn't happen, but I haven't seen it.
Okay. And just on the topic of regulations, because you were going through some of them related to cooling, but I know a lot of what you said in the US translates to European or different global regulations. One of those that you haven't mentioned is explosive atmospheres. Particularly, I noticed your generators were in an enclosed environment. Do you ever have to do any explosive atmosphere studies? It's DESIR in the UK and some other places in the world, but is that something that is typical for a data center?
So it depends on obviously how the system is set up and what we do. So that's a great call out. So one is we do have sensors. So you have like your smoke sensors and those types of things for that. In our battery rooms, you have hydrogen sensors. That's mostly your wet cell type batteries for that. And then you also, for your refrigerant, you'd have a refrigerant sensor. And depending on what happens, so usually what happens is one of those sensors will go off, a ventilation system is activated, a warning is activated on the outside of the room and inside the room to evacuate that area. And then you evacuate that area, and then there's a series of things that happen. So usually it's a ventilation type system for refrigerant. It'll evacuate that area. Same thing with that. As far as generators go, generally there's so much air going through that system. So where the generators are is basically, as you saw the room, but what you didn't see is the ventilation on each side of the room. So usually there's walls on, let's say, the north side and the south side. East and west is all louvers and everything. So when those generators fire up, they have huge fans and they have a huge amount of coolants there as well to cool those generators. I was just talking to one of the maintenance guys. One of the generators holds 350 gallons of antifreeze inside these huge radiators. And so that's how in a generator room, it's controlled. There's just so much airflow that there wouldn't be a hazardous atmosphere happening there. The more the hazard, the hazardous atmosphere there is noise.
Okay. And I imagine in the data center itself and some of the other areas, dust suppression and dust control is really critical just because of the electrical equipment that you've got in there too.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Dust, those are clean rooms. So those areas are basically their own room. You have usually it depends on what's going on, depends on how clean it needs to be. It also depends on some other things that are going on there, but generally there's a two door system, or could be a two-door system. So you have a door that you go into, it's ventilated, there's a downdraft created, and then you go into another door. There's like the sticky mat there. So you have to step on the sticky mat, and then you go through the system there. But again, that air is circulated so much that you have filtration and those types of things too that take care of it. But those are clean rooms and clean areas. Also, you have to be careful too, if you have dust, it could activate your smoke detection system. And we're going to talk about fire systems here in just a second.
Okay, I'll let you continue. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So NFPA 75 in the United States is the recommended standard for fire protection of information and technology equipment. It basically says there should be 3 levels of data center fire protection. So you have your building level protection, that's generally like in your offices, which is generally your fire sprinkler systems. And then throughout the building, you should have like your handheld extinguishers, your passive fire protection, so like a pull handle, that kind of stuff there too. The next level would be your room level protection, which is actually in the server room, the white space. And there's different things. One is early detection systems are used there. It's so that, as we were just talking about, dust can set it off, but usually that's an active where there's a pump and there's certain in certain areas, usually down the aisle, you'll see little hoses kind of dropping down within the aisles. And from that, there is suction, and that air is brought into the system and then brought into detection. And generally, what that is looking for is any particles. It's really smoke particles, but dust can trip that off. Certain things like that would be your early detection system. And basically, all these areas are monitored by what is called a BMS, which is a building management system. So you'll see that sensor at the control room say, hey, there's something going on, it needs to be looked at there. Generally, we're using clean agent suppression systems. It goes back and forth. I've seen both. I've seen clean agent, and I've also seen wet sprinkler systems in the data center. It's really a risk assessment done by the owner of the systems, and the requirements of the data center would dictate if it's going to be using a clean agent suppression system or a wet sprinkler system. Generally, you'll see also that this is a pre-action, or you'll see a pre-action fire sprinkler system, meaning that usually it's backed by nitrogen. And then if a fire head were to go off, or if there was a sensor, you have to have 2 sensors go off before there's an action that happens. So that's usually like 2 smoke detectors would have to go off, or if you have rack level protection, which is the 3rd level, 2 racks go off, then that major system would go off. You also have rack level protection. So inside the racks, there could be fire suppression, those types of things you'll see actually inside the racks. Usually you'll always see detection inside the racks. So they're monitoring temperature mostly. It's making sure that it doesn't exceed or start climbing and doesn't stop. And that's really all I have for fire. If there's any other questions, Beth, I'm going to hand this over to Bridgette, and she's going to take it over and talk more about future outlook.
Bridgette, I do have a couple of questions specific to fire safety, if you guys are available to answer some.
Sure.
We have 2 actually that specifically ask about hypoxic environments in data centers. Do you have any experience with low oxygen environments in a data center? If so, any advice for companies that need to manage that within relevant standards and regulations? And how do you handle, or have you ever heard of temporarily raising oxygen in these locations to allow personnel to come in for maintenance activities or some other function?
Both of those are great questions and they kind of go together. So in the US, we would follow what OSHA's requirement is, where EU has their own. But the most important part of it is to have a comprehensive risk assessment, making sure that we do site specific, assess any exposure areas and risk, make sure that you establish and implement safe work practices. In regards to temporarily increasing oxygen, that is not a standard practice, and you would need to use like your breathing apparatuses and things. We would never temporarily increase the oxygen in a room.
It generally is dictated also by the standard and what type of system you have. So what kind of clean agent do you have? Some clean agents do not affect O2 levels, where others might. And so then that's there would be a warning. Usually in those type of systems, there's a warning before it activates. So it's going to tell you, hey, get out of this room. You need to evacuate this room. You evacuate. There's usually a button on the wall that confirms that everybody's evacuated, and then they'll extinguish.
Okay, that's helpful. One other fire safety related question. Are there any specific suppressants that are required as part of redundancy programs? So I'm guessing my question to build on this would be, do you have different levels of suppressants based on, this is your N+1 and then your N+2, as you get further down the line of redundancy, how do your protections change?
So your redundancy is really like rack level is one level, and then you have your room level, and then you have your building level protection. And so that's really how your redundancy is brought into that. And then you have different levels within those three levels there as well. So your rack level may have a different type of extinguishing system than maybe your room. So those would be your different levels of redundancy there as well, along with smoke detection, fire detection, heat detection. Those are all wrapped into the fire suppression system.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, Bridget, I didn't mean to take that over.
Yeah. Sorry, Bridget, over to you.
Questions. That makes life easier for me. Looking at the future, things that they're looking at, there's going to be continued growth and investment. They expect there to be 11.24 compounded annual growth over the next 10 years. You're going to see a dominance of hyperscalers. They're designed for massive data loads and rapid scaling, so that's expected to lead the growth. You're going to see regional growth, like North America holds the largest market share currently in 2024, where APAC is expected to experience a very fast growth in the coming years. Development and financing will be on the market for 2025. It's anticipated to be a record year for data center development financing, with an estimated $170 billion in asset value requiring financing. We're going to see that it's an undersupplied market. Despite its projected supply growth, data centers are expected to remain in the undersupplied market all the way through the end of 2028, I believe, leading to potential revenue per available foot growth of at least 10% annually. As we know, AI is coming on the market and it's rapidly growing, so that will be a major driver. So with the increased demand, AI, particularly generative AI, is driving an unprecedented surge in the demand for data centers, requiring immense computing power and data storage. High power density, so to accommodate the AI workloads, we have to increase the power density of the server racks, requiring the advanced cooling systems. And as we look to optimize AI-driven technology within data centers for real-time I can't speak, optimization, energy usage and operational efficiency and predictive maintenance. We're going to have evolving technologies, which Kevin touched on some of them, like liquid cooling. We're looking at sustainable infrastructure. Some of the large players like Meta are trying to create, and they have several in the works for completely sustainable data centers to use less power. We're looking at renewable energy, such as solar, wind, and even nuclear in some cases. Using the advanced cooling technologies and virtualization techniques. Water conservation is very important, implementing water efficient cooling systems and changing that technology. Another up and coming thing is a modular design. There's starting to be modular data centers built that are like smaller. Everything's housed in one modular design and it can just be set out into a smaller location with a less footprint. Waste management, like focusing on recycling. What do we do with all of these old servers and different equipment? Looking at ways to repurpose it. Edge computing, so edge data centers located closer to the data sources are expected to provide lower latency for applications like your AI. Software-defined data centers where infrastructures are virtualized and delivered as a service. They offer greater flexibility and scalability. But all of this doesn't come without challenges and opportunities. The power infrastructure, so meeting the surging power demands of data centers is a big challenge. If you notice, they're in certain areas due to the power infrastructure, you'll see a huge area of data centers, like in Virginia is one of them. And out in Arizona, there's a big hub of different data centers just because the power infrastructure can support that. There'll be supply chain constraints. So issues with the supply of the different chips and servers and other components hinder the expansion of our data centers. Sustainability concerns. What is the environmental impact? That's under a lot of scrutiny, and that's why we're starting to lean towards sustainable practices. Another thing that we don't consider is talent shortages. Finding and retaining skilled professionals in this operation and the security remains a challenge. We have security threats, not only from cyber attacks, but from just our buildings, the structures. So looking at how we can maintain that. So the future of data centers is bright. It's driven by relentless growth of data and AI, but the growth also presents significant challenges related to our power, sustainability, and the technological advances. So addressing those in collaboration with other industries is what's going to help us lead to our continued success.
Thank you, Bridgette. We have 3 minutes. I want to ask kind of a wrap-up question. You were talking about talent shortages, Bridgette. Do you think that data center safety is a specialty that young professionals should develop from the start? Or do you think this is something that you can jump into from a relatively unrelated industry like construction? Or if not necessarily that, then what are industries that you're commonly seeing people move from into data centers?
It is from a wide variety. I will say that we are piloting a program with some, because it's not only just our safety professionals, but just the technicians and the knowledge to work on that equipment. So CBRE is actually beginning to work with some tech colleges to create programs around this and help build out so that we do have knowledgeable workers. Also, within the last 2 years, there has been a data center safety council that has been developed that just focuses on these areas. So we have seen from different, as you heard, I came from oil and gas, Kevin came from manufacturing. So you can come from other industries, but it is specialized in some ways in understanding, what the hazards are.
Okay, understood. Well, want to make sure we respect everyone's time. So I want to close out. This brings us to the end of our discussion. I want to thank you, Kevin and Bridgette, for sharing your expertise and insights. Honestly, your perspectives are really important to this conversation, especially the future outlook. Really appreciate that perspective. I also want to extend our gratitude to IOSH again and all of our attendees for taking time out of your days to attend. We do have unanswered questions in the chat that we weren't able to get to. We're going to review those afterward and attempt to provide some timely responses to you. So until then, stay safe, everybody. We hope to see you at future events and hope you have a great day and a great evening wherever you are. Thank you.